Hi, it's me, Christine. Welcome to episode 8, the last episode in series 1 of my podcast, Unmuzzled at 67. So last time we were talking about my move from Jersey back to Glasgow and about to embark on a new career move into hospitality, which I wasn't sure about. I felt maybe I was a bit too glamorous. But nonetheless, because there was live-in accommodation and I was going to be working as a barmaid, so as a potential alky, this was the most wonderful job I could ever have. That's what I'm going to talk about today. But before I do need to mention to you that there are references in detail to alcoholism here in this episode and also anorexia. So please give that some thought. If that's something that might upset you, then maybe this is not the episode for you. Give it some thought before you can continue. So for the rest of us that are here, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. So let's look at this new adventure together. There I am, returned from Jersey, the heaviest weight ever, 13 stone 12, nearly 14 stone and 5'1". So, that was quite heavy. And, the lovely Glaswegian pals are saying, for fuck's sake, Christine, who ate all the pies right enough? What happened to you there? What have you been doing? Look at the size of you. All that real sensitive stuff. But what could I say? I was a huge big lassie now. And it got me thinking. I'm glad actually of those comments. I love Glaswegianness. I can't get enough of it. And the humour is everything I would ever want to have in my life. But it made me think about a time when I'd worked in the makeup thing in Glasgow years ago of a colleague of mine who had lost about 4 stone. And I mean, she was a young girl. She would be older than me, maybe 20, but God, I couldn't believe the difference that the 4 stone had made. I said, my God, you look fantastic. You look brilliant. She said, you know what? I love being slim. I can't get enough of it. I wish I'd done it sooner. And she said she felt so well, she felt so energetic, she looked so vibrant. And I always remembered that. But, for me, I had always been chubby. I had never, ever been slim my whole life. But I kind of remember a little kind of click happened inside my head. And I looked at myself and I thought, enough. I have had enough of being fat. I've had enough of being called, where's that big fat lassie? You could say that in those days, right? Get the big fat. The big fat lassie I'm talking about. So that was me, obviously. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I feel as if I'm a young girl trapped in an old fat body. So that my mind was made up. It just was as simple as that. My mind was made up. I remembered that girl and thinking, well, if she can do it, so can I do it. What would it be like to be slim? I had no idea, never. So it was that in itself was a new adventure. And I'd said to that girl at the time, how did you lose that weight anyway? She says, the Weight Watchers. She says, they've got a points system, very easy to follow. I don't know what the system is now, but it was a very easy system then. I says, that's the boy for me. I'll get down to that Weight Watchers club. Down I went. I hated it. I hate things like that where, you've got to clap all the people that lose all the weight and then the ones that don't, they get all that. Better be good next week, all that stuff. I hate all that teacher class thing. I hate all that. But I stuck it out for a good few weeks and I definitely lost weight quite quickly. And of course, it was very nutritious, the Weight Watchers diet. But I thought, it's a fucking cult. I hate all that class thing. And you get culted into it. I'm not doing that. I always know better. I'm off. Never went back. I says to myself, I will adapt this to my lifestyle. So, of course, by this time, I'm ensconced in the new job, working as a barmaid, getting towed into the baby as much as I can, not when I'm working, but any other opportunity, yes, definitely. And this is how insane this is, and I must really, really say that quite rigorously. My system was eat 200, drink 1,000 calories. How insane is that? So it meant for me that the booze was far more important than the food. So, but there wasn't like that every day. You know, I mean, I was working full time, so that wasn't every day, and I had to curtail the old drinking. But what was also happening with me was that despite the fact, I mean, I was losing weight, but even on the days where I wasn't drinking, I was cutting back because I could see, in a way, I could see myself losing weight, and I wanted to lose it more. So although I wasn't always drinking 1,000 calories, I was maybe only eating 400 or 500, thinking, you know, I'll lose weight more quickly. I mean, it's insanity, utter insanity. But the other thing that was a wee bit worrying was that when I looked in the mirror, I just saw the old me. I didn't see the new me. And when I bought anything that was maybe a size 12 or even a 14, I had been an 18 before I started to diet, I would look at it and say, I think they put the wrong label on that. I would never accept that I had actually lost weight. In terms of confronting it. So, for example, when I looked in the mirror, I never saw the size 10 or the 12 or whatever it was that I became. So, being me, everything becomes extreme. Start off in a good way, but you know, start off with the diet in a good, healthy way, but it becomes altered into being something far more extreme. So my weight over a period of time plummeted downwards, and finally my period stopped. And I didn't know why. I didn't connect them at all. To be honest with you, this would be my kind of the 70s, definitely. And although anorexia was definitely around, it wasn't talked about that much. And there wasn't obviously the facilities and things that there are, and the knowledge that there is about it now, 50 years later. But it definitely was a thing. I mean, people did know about it. I certainly knew about it, but it wouldn't dawn on me that I ever had it. And I didn't know that my period stopping would have anything to do with it at all. So I go to the doctor, say, look, my periods have stopped. And we started talking about eating. And she said, you're very, very slim. I mean, what's your diet like? And I just kind of made up a few things. She says, you'll need to go to the hospital. They've got sort of doctors that will deal with eating things. I wasn't really bothered about that. I was more bothered about the periods because, again, I did not think that one had to do with the other. So when I went in, we had an initial consultation, and I was, as usual, sort of, trying not to be honest, and said to me, well, why don't we weigh you? And I was quite shocked to know that I just was nearly 6'5", 6'7", which was 2 stone lighter than anybody should be for my height, and being a female. So, of course, the first thing I said was, are you sure those scales are right? Maybe you should check them. And I just saw him looking at me and making notes. He must have thought she's completely mental, but that would be a normal response from me. So he sat me down and he explained that loss of periods with women in those days, mostly who had anorexia, was really quite a common thing. And what had happened was the weight had gone too low, and it was affecting all sorts of other things, estrogen and all that kind of thing. And if the periods weren't reinstalled, which could only happen through eating and getting up to as near the weight I should be as possible, then it could in fact affect my fertility. And he said, in some cases, women have to have IVF treatment if they want to have children. If this continues, that is a possibility. He said, you'll need to come back for treatment. We'll put together an eating plan for you, and we're going to ask you to come regularly. Aye, right. So I had no intentions of going back. But I did take on board what he was saying about the period thing, and not because I was worried about not having a child, because, I was in my 20s, I was wild, wasn't interested in anything like that. But I could just tell by his tone that, and I knew myself it wasn't natural for a woman of my age not to have a period. So gradually I started to eat a wee bit more. And over a period of a couple of months, periods returned. So as far as I was concerned, all was good. So I think I got myself up to about 7.5 stone. Still a stone lighter, but just that extra stone brought me up to what enough for my periods to come back. So my body was functioning at some kind of level. And in later years, I'm quite slim now, but in later years, I have always managed to control my weight. And I'm going to tell you why. When I first lost weight, I was in my 20s, I loved being slim. It was so new for me that bones appeared in my body. Like, I don't know, is that called your collarbone? That bone there, right? These bones here. And I just couldn't get over them. I'd never seen these bones before. I was loving my life. I just, because I'd never been slim, the whole experience was just incredible for me. I remember, in fact, even going to the doctors when I had quite a protruding bone at my back, and I said, look, there's something wrong here. There's a bone growing out of me. She said, Christine, that's called your venous bone. And it's actually what we would call a coccyx bone, just at the base of your back. It's just because you're so thin now that your bones are showing through. And in fact, at my worst point, I just remembered this, at my worst point when I was 6.5 stone, it was quite difficult for me to sit on anything because they called your sitting bones, there was virtually no fat on them. So it was, well, I'm not saying it was painful, but it was uncomfortable because it was my bones that would hit a seat, not the flesh around them. But still, nothing stopped the sheer enjoyment and the freedom and the wonder of not being called the big fat lassie anymore. It was, honestly, I can remember it as if it was yesterday. And I've always wanted to keep that. So I've always managed to keep my weight at a good level because I never want to lose that joy almost of being slim, because I never took it for granted. So it was a great thing for me. And when, the periods came back, for me, always good. I was still, torturing myself for lots of other things, but that was a great thing to happen. So men were buzzing about me now. That had never happened to me in my life. Like flies round a shite. I was just overwhelmed by it all. I just couldn't get over how my life had changed in every way. But unfortunately, none of them stayed around. My drinking was such that I could be very embarrassing. I would be falling about. I never, ever was at a point where I would say, oh, that's enough. I'm not having any more. Never did I say that. I would drink till there just was either no money left or the pubs were shut or whatever. So much as men came and went, they definitely didn't stay very long, because I was not what I would call girlfriend material, not even slightly. But working in the bar, and being amongst drink all day long was, even the men coming and going, it didn't overshadow that. I still absolutely loved it. But as I said, I didn't drink when I was working. But, once I was drunk, I could be quite aggressive. I was very cheeky. I could just really very forward, very forthright. I could just start a fight in an empty house. And I just wasn't a nice person to be around. I drove all the good guys away. I was embarrassing. And as I said, I was not girlfriend material at all. The next few years, I moved from that hotel in the Highlands, and I kind of moved around. I was going to say the UK, but I didn't go to Wales or Ireland. I worked in the Lake District for a wee while. I worked in Manchester for a wee while. And I finally found myself down in a place called Eastbourne, which you probably have heard of on the south coast of England. And I would say I was definitely at my worst at this point. I wasn't drinking during work days, but as for me, days off were for getting drunk, and they were for absolutely no other reason. But then one night I just went too far. One night I went into the hotel bar on a night when I was off duty, and I was demanding a drink. So, number one, if you're staff, you're not allowed to use the guest facilities under any circumstances, and being drunk, never mind coming into the place where you weren't demanding drink, was a sackable offence. So I was forcibly removed from the bar and taken to my accommodation, and a note was put through my door to say that I had to appear before the general manager the next day. So I couldn't remember anything when I got up. I couldn't remember anything, but there was this letter, so I had to go. So I was on my way to the general manager's office knowing that's it, you get the sack now, through drink, that's it, you're finished now, Christine. And lo and behold, there was what I called later an angel without wings from Govan, who also worked in the hotel, who had been keeping an eye on me. I didn't even know him. And he stood beside me at that meeting, which, as I said, that should have marked the end for me. And he told the GM that I was an alcoholic. He told him that he was a recovering alcoholic, and that his name was Jimmy, would look after me. He would take complete responsibility for my behaviour, and he would take me to AA meetings, and he would get me sober. He explained that alcoholism was an illness and that he needed to give me a chance. I was only a young woman. So, fortunately for me, the GM thought the world of this guy and reluctantly agreed to give me another chance. But I look back on that day, and I've never seen this guy in my life before, although he'd been watching me and watching my antics. I felt as if there I was, I could have been kicked off the cliff, and I felt as if he just swooped down and grabbed me and pulled me under his wings and pulled me into safety. He saved me in every single sense. And of course, I was the talk of the steamy at my work in the hotel, and people either ignored me or laughed at me. I was just mortified. But Jimmy did take me to a meeting every single day, and he became my sponsor. And he also became a lifelong friend. He guarded me ferociously from all the men that tried to hit on me when I was in such a vulnerable state. And we went to meetings every single day, mostly at night time because we were working during the day. And he put me through the 12 steps of recovery in AA. Jimmy was about 50. And he was gay. And his own story of growing up trying to hide his sexuality in Govan in the 30s was harrowing. You know, he was telling me how he still had quite a high-pitched, effeminate voice, and how he had to practice in his bedroom, which he shared with about 4 other siblings, to bring the tone of his voice down, because if he spoke in his natural voice, people would turn round and look, and he would immediately be singled out as somebody different, and there was just no way that could happen. So that's only one thing. His story was brutal, absolutely brutal. And yet, you know, here he was making himself available for me. He's a man who'd had a terrible upbringing, but he was very well thought of within Alcoholics Anonymous, and had taken on many people to sponsor and look after, but now I was his new project. Thank God for me. I was so lucky to have him, and so lucky to have his guidance and his experience. And, you know, the universe must have been looking down on me that day, because I'll always be grateful for his friendship and for his love of me. I was like his daughter because he saved me. He saved me, and along with AA. And finally, as my head started to clear, I did quite like the meetings, and I was very inspired by the individuals that I met. And without question, this is something I could never have done alone. No question about that. As any addict knows, facing up to yourself, who you are, what you've done to yourself and to others when you're alone, your own thoughts, is hard. Emotions run high, but so does shame. Jimmy used to refer to my age a lot. He would say, my God, you've got the best years of your life still to come. People don't come into AA until they're usually in their 40s and 50s, and here you are in your 20s. Imagine what kind of life you could have if you were sober. The only thing you cannot do in your life is drink alcohol. Everything else is okay. He would tell me that all the time, and that kept everything in perspective for me. So my head was clearing. I was starting to think a bit more clearly. And one of the things that I noticed, I've never actually asked anybody else in AA if they noticed this too, but one of the things that I noticed was the vibrancy of colour in the world. So Eastbourne is a place where there's lots and lots and lots of flowers and, communal areas everywhere. And of course, the weather is fantastic down there, so they can grow quite tropical things and very brightly coloured things. And I just was amazed at the colour. I mean, I'd been living there for a good few months, and I never noticed anything like that, although I walked past all these communal areas with flowers every day. And I was taken aback by that. I was taken aback by the colour of the sky. Everything seemed to be so vibrant, the colour of the leaves. I just really thought to myself, my God, you've been living in a fog for all these years. So the meetings and the 12 steps of recovery were what my life was all about for the next 3 months. And if I got fed up and wanted a break or whatever, Jimmy would come down on me like a ton of bricks and say, remember where you were 3 months ago. This is your life now. He was always right. I never argued with him. I knew he wanted the best life for me, and this was the only way. But accepting responsibility for my behaviour for all those years, coming to terms with it, it was hard, but I was ready, and I was fearless because I had Jimmy in my corner. The 12 steps of recovery are quite daunting, and they do say that you should always do them with a sponsor or do them with somebody with a lot more experience than you. So out of the 12 steps, there were 2 that I found particularly hard to attack or hard to get started. Step 4 says, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself. Step 8 says, make a list of all the persons you have harmed and make willing to make amends to them. So I really struggled with the shame and the embarrassment of making a moral inventory of myself. But really, I suppose it was like telling your story. It was like telling your story because booze infiltrated every part of your life. But it was difficult. There were lots of tears. But it had to be done. And I have to say that when that moral inventory, I managed to do that with Jimmy, with his help, I felt clean. I felt ready to embrace my sober life, and that almost I had written down all the things I had done and was willing to let them go. Let them go and be ready for the new sober life. Step 8 was something else. I mean, having to contact people, from years ago, all people you had harmed, you had to make contact with and try to make amends. So you had to be very high on humility to do that. And you had to go forward with an apology. And my sponsor said, you really should do this face-to-face if you can, or if not, on the phone. He was there. He wouldn't have let me do that myself. He was with me all the time to make sure I did it. And that I found that very hard to do. But still, it had to be done. And so some people would not accept your apology and just say, no, I think you were out of order, and I'm not letting you back in my life. And that's fair enough, because you've got to be prepared for that. Other people would say, well, I'm glad you're in AA and good luck to you. And yes, I do forgive you. And some people were a wee bit of both. So they would say, yeah, that's fine, okay. But then their actions would say something else. But you were not to be focused on the outcome. You were to be focused on your part in this step. These are real life lessons. I mean, these two in particular were really hard for me. In fact, I would go as far as saying that anyone who is looking to turn their life around, who's looking to become the best version of themselves, or they're in that kind of mind framework, my advice would be go and look at those 12 steps. Doesn't matter whether you're an addict or not. If you want to be a better human being, if you want humility to be a bigger part of your life, you go and look at those steps, because they will keep you in good stead, and they are good guidance for anybody who wants to be a better person. As far as real benefits for getting sober, well, it's obvious, clear heads, no hangovers. And there was also a thing that I didn't know about all the toxins coming out of your body. And for different people, that happened in different ways. For me, I had boils all over myself, my back, and that just seemed, I was horrified. But, Jimmy would say, no, that's quite normal. Don't worry. This is all the toxins leaving your body. And of course, I felt alive. I felt worth living. Life was completely different, sober, utterly different, and better, without question. So Jimmy said to me, you're going to have to make amends to your mum and dad, Christine. And I was obviously not wanting to do that. I just didn't know if I could face it. He said, look, what we'll do is we'll go back to Glasgow, the two of us, and we'll try and tackle this together. I'm your sponsor. Let's go for it. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. But it wasn't a happy moment. My parents looked broken. And I needed to take responsibility for that. All the years of worry, trying to manage me, they had been completely out of their depth. My mother was horrified that her daughter was in AA. She could not get to grips with her. For her, AA was for people who were down and out. She didn't want to know either. So if we said to her, come to a meeting, oh, for God, I mean, no way. She said, that's your stuff. It's not my stuff. I don't want anything to do with it. And she, and my dad as well said to Jimmy, where did we go wrong? And he would say, it was nothing to do with you. It was something in her. But I remember the looks on their faces. They were worn out with it all. And I said to myself, I said to Jimmy, will I ever be able to make this up to them? Look at them. They're so broken. And I feel that I feel so angry with myself. And Jimmy said, Christine, actions speak louder than words. In other words, do the 12 steps, do the AA program. And that is the only way that you can try to make it up to them. So we returned to Eastbourne to continue working in my sobriety. And I stayed there for another 18 months under Jimmy's wonderful guidance. And we had a lot of fun. He was a very funny guy, great sense of humour. And I'm glad to tell you that I never have touched alcohol since. That was the end of it for me. But I just want to end with what my mum said to me on that day when we went up to see her and to apologise. She said to me, please don't tell anyone, Christine, that you're in AA. And I never did up until I was maybe 60. So you're not the first people to know, but there's only maybe about 4 people that know more than you. But that even made me more sad for her, but also, a recognition of the generation and the values that she grew up with. So That, my friends, is the end of episode 8 and, in fact, the end of series 1. I do hope that there's been parts of it that you've enjoyed, and it's been great for me to have your company. The next episode is a little review that I've put together, just going back on some of the points from series 1 to try to, I was telling you the story as it happened, but now I'd probably like to, with the review, look back at it with different eyes, not as it was happening, just to kind of wrap it up, if you like, and from that we'll start on series 2. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've been with me for all of this journey throughout series 1. If you have, I'm so grateful. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time when we do the review of series 1.